Hey guys, today I would like to speak to you about how smart CrossFitters identify their weaknesses and systematically go about eliminating them. Now, this is one of the shortcuts or hacks, as it were, to ensure that you boost your scores on the leaderboard and put yourself in contention in your age group or in your box alongside people who are probably a lot younger than you, because they won't be doing what you're doing. And I'm going to explain what that is right now. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about growth mindset. We're going to talk about how we categorize some of the skills and attributes and talents required for making better scores in CrossFit. And then we're going to talk a little bit about human nature and how you can stop that from working against you and harness it to work for you. Okay, so firstly, a little bit about myself and why I'm here and why on earth you should listen to me. So from 12 months ago, in February 2022, I broke my ankle and a pylon fracture, so I split it up the middle. 2 pins were inserted to fix it and knit it all back together again. I spent 6 weeks hobbling around on crutches. 6 months later, I entered a high rocks competition in Valencia and placed second in my age category. And then later, probably 12 months altogether from when I broke my ankle, I got through to the quarterfinals in my age group in CrossFit, in the CrossFit Open, and placed second in the UK in my age group, which is 50 to 54. So that being said, some of what I'm talking about theoretically, I've put into practice and it's worked for me. And that's where I'm coming from with this video, and I hope it helps you. If you're a CrossFit master and you're over 40 or over 50, then you will most likely have faced some of the obstacles that I'm going to talk about today. The first one being growth mindset. Now, this seems to be the buzzword of the last decade. How you can have a glass ceiling or a fixed mindset preventing you, or the self-limiting beliefs that everybody likes to talk about. Now, what does that actually mean in practicality? In my example that I just gave, I was a 50-year-old man who had broken his ankle and thought, well, any hopes I had of competing at the CrossFit Games or doing any of that sort of stuff was out the window, because this was my new reality. And although I knew I'd probably get off crutches, I thought, I'm not going to get my fitness back. I won't be able to be as strong as I was before. And, what about the Olympic lifting? What about running? All that sort of stuff. And if you've had an injury or something that's holding you back like that, maybe that's become your current reality, and you think that because of your age, there's no way back and there's no way to improve your strength, your fitness, acquire new skills. And I certainly thought that perhaps I had plateaued or stagnated or stopped entirely last year. But that's not the case. And having a growth mindset allows you to take away some of the limits and some of the beliefs that other people want you to believe, i.e. that your prime is behind you, that you're in your 50s, you're not going to get stronger, you're not going to acquire new skills, and you shouldn't be trying all of that, because you should be in pipe and slippers and watching, I don't know, Question of Sport, does that still exist? Something like that on TV with your pipe and your slippers. If you subscribe to the growth mindset, well, then you're taking away those limits and you're going to allow yourself freedom to try things that potentially you thought were beyond your capabilities. And I know that certainly worked for me, pushing harder now in my 50s than I ever did when I was in my 20s. I'm probably fitter, I have a lower resting heart rate, I am more competitive, and on my good days, I can keep up with the youngsters in my box, and that makes me happy. So, CrossFit is it's ever increasing in its complexity. So where before there was just fitness and strength and maybe a couple of skills, now that is exponentially more complex than that, and we have lots and lots of different skills, and to excel in everything is very, very difficult, and it's hard to know where to start in fixing some of your weaknesses or even addressing them. I have created what I call the weight plate template, and it basically breaks down CrossFit into strength, fitness, mobility, nutrition, and what was the last thing? Skills. So strength should be pretty straightforward, but I'm going to tell you something that's probably more important than what you've thought about before. So everybody will tell you the squat, the deadlift, the overhead press, the bench press even nowadays is something that you need to focus on as well. They're the compound movements that every CrossFitter needs to focus on in order to maintain or build their strength. Now, yes, I believe in preserving strength because I'm 50, but I also want to actually try and build some strength as well. And by building some strength, or trying to at least, I'm going to cover that, tick that box of preserving strength. Okay, that's to one side. Now, let's have a look at what's actually the first thing that's more important is if you want to be in contention in CrossFit, you have to be hitting the RX weights. And so if there are any movements or any workouts where you're not hitting the RX weights, that's where you need to focus on your strength. Because if you're not on the RX weight, then you're not going to be on the leaderboard, or you're not going to be in contention at any rate. Now, that's not to say I want you to go about bludgeoning yourself and injuring yourself trying to manhandle or woman-handle those heavier weights or heavier dumbbells just so you can get into contention on the leaderboard. You have to work within your limits, but know that if you're not using the RX weights, that's the first port of call. That's your first area of focus in terms of strength. Moving on to fitness. Again, I'll have some ideas on fitness that may help. So we have the monostructural tests such as, your 2K row, the 5K run. Maybe there's something in swimming. I'm probably not very familiar with that at the moment. But you have the assault bike and the ski erg. And all of those are relevant and necessary and great for building your fitness. In fact, I believe strongly in doing low intensity steady state at the Maffetone method, which I've spoken about in a previous video. But today, in terms of fitness, I wanted to speak about whilst the monostructural stuff has relevance, you also want to have a look at, because CrossFit isn't just monostructural events such as the 5K row or whatever. Maybe it might be a marathon row, but usually it's going to be monostructural with gymnastics with a weightlifting piece. So it is more complex than just one aspect of fitness. And so knowing what your capability is in some of the benchmark WODs is the way to go, and the way to assess and identify some of your weaknesses there. So for instance, Fran, you could break down it's a short workout, and you can break that down, and you've got beginner, intermediate, and elite. And knowing the times that you are beginner level, intermediate level, and elite level, and the next step to that would be what's a competitive time in your age group as well. So I strongly suggest that you look those up. They are available on the internet. I've created a blog, which I'll put a link for in the description below, which I think I've got about 3 different benchmark WODs and the times that are beginners times, intermediate times, and elite times. I think you might have to look up yourself for your own age group and see what's a competitive time in those. But that will give you a little bit of benchmarking for yourself and where you stand. And then what do you need to work on? Is it the sprinting WODs? Is it the long duration WODs? Or is it something in between? And that's where you focus your efforts long term, if you want to be in contention in your box or if you want to compete in the open. Now, moving on to skills. So yes, there are tons of different skills and ever increasing, but one of the ways to break that down is to have a look at the most frequently programmed skills in the last 10 years for the CrossFit Open, or for that matter, even in your box. Now, I have looked this up myself, and things like double unders and I think it's a toes to bar or something like that. Those two movements pretty much are programmed in every open. In fact, most of those, like the handstand push-ups and bar muscle-ups and ring muscle-ups, they're all going to appear. But you can get a sort of a hierarchy list of what's programmed most frequently and focus on those as priorities, and obviously filling in the gaps of your weaknesses. Now, you want to be working on one or two movements, really maximum. Focus on them, give them your full attention. Try sort of a low level maintenance on other movements, But by focusing on a couple of movements, you can give it your proper attention, prioritize it, and get to a level where it is competitive so that you're not falling behind in any workout that's got double unders or any workout that's got toes to bar, that you just fall off a cliff. So you bring it up to a level where it's competitive, then you can move on to the next skill and focus on that and bring that up to par as well. Rather than trying to do everything at once, just really use your time wisely and prioritize and focus on 1 to 2 things at a time. Okay, mobility and nutrition, I'm probably going to leave to another video because opening that can of worms is a little bit beyond the scope of what I'm talking about today. And I finally wanted to finish off with human nature and how working on your weaknesses, sometimes human nature, your own ego can get in the way. And I see this is probably the biggest downfall for most CrossFit athletes, is that they don't like to work on their weaknesses. They fucking love spending time on what they're good at because that gets the positive reinforcement, the validation, and maybe their identity is wrapped up. I mean, I spent a lot of time doing handstands and got them to a level where I was, pretty good at them. And I then decided to cut that off and stop and move on and try learning and acquiring new skills and bringing them up to par. But it's very tempting to stick at this thing that you're good at and become even better and become excellent. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to do that, that is entirely your choice. But if you want to be in contention and competitive as a CrossFitter, then that's not necessarily the best way to go. You're better off spending a bit more focus, prioritizing your focus on bringing up your weaknesses rather than making your strong points excellent. I'm sure there's a sport where that's a requirement, or it's even probably a strength. But in CrossFit, you're better off spending your time making sure that you eliminate weaknesses rather than building your strengths into areas of perfection. And if you look at your own CrossFit box, you will see people who excel at weightlifting, and that's the workouts that they show up for, and they want to do really well on those. And the workouts that they're dog shit at, they will cherry pick and decide that they don't want to come that day, or they've got a prior commitment and they don't want to be shown up in front of everybody else. And to each their own. I'm not judging from, despite what I just said, I'm not actually judging people for that. It's just that if you want to get better, these are the shortcuts that will make a big difference to your scores and put you on the leaderboard before others that don't actually spend the time putting in the hard work in the areas that are unglamorous, where they don't get the kudos, where they don't get the praise, and they don't get the validation. Okay, guys, I'm hoping that some of this resonated with you. Please don't forget to like the channel, subscribe to the channel even, and like this video, and hit the notification bell to ensure that you see me again and hear more of what I've got to say. As a CrossFit master, I'm hoping to pass on some tips that will help you, and maybe I'll see you at a competition someday further down the line. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.